its subsidiaries, or sponsors. Encouraging, educating, and empowering you into action. This is Warriors Talk with your host, Lady ReShell.
Hello. Welcome to Warriors Talk with author and founder Lady ReShell, where we move away from awareness towards action. It's Health and Wellness Monday, and our topic for today is the dangers of sugar. We are live on Intellectual Radio. We just heard from the Drive at 5 with Roman. Keep it locked right here on Intellectual Radio and allow us to feed your brain. On the last episode of Warriors Talk, Rizal and I talked about the consequences of moving too fast in a relationship. Go over to YouTube, type in Intellectual Radio, and stay connected for any episodes you may have missed. The quote of the day is, healing cannot happen in fear, and fear cannot happen in healing. We are so grateful for our sponsor on today. We have Pastor Michael Richardson with the Emanuel C.O.G.I.C, and he has a special message for us.
Greetings, I am Pastor Michael Richardson.
And I am First Lady Anastasia Richardson from the Emanuel Church of God in Christ. We're located at 3058 West Van Buren in Chicago, Illinois. We are building upon a solid foundation.
And we're inviting you to join us every Sunday morning on Facebook Live at Emanuel C.O.G.I.C at 10:15 Central Standard Time. And you can also view our videos on our YouTube channel at Emanuel C.O.G.I.C-MR. Once again, this is Pastor Michael Richardson
and First Lady Anastasia Richardson, and we're from the Emanuel Church of God in Christ. We are building upon a solid foundation.
Here are your trending topics for today. According to CNN, Joe Biden was asked a very simple question in an interview that aired on Sunday. Has he decided whether to run again for president in 2024? The answer he gave was anything but a straightforward answer. He said, look, my intentions, as I said to begin with, is that I would run again, Biden said, as he told 60 Minutes, but it's just an intention. Is it a firm decision that he will run again? That remains unseen, which is an interesting way to answer the question, especially when you consider the following things. Biden is currently 79 years old. He is the oldest person ever to be elected to the first presidential term, that is. And secondly, he repeatedly cast himself as a bridge candidate to younger generations on the campaign trail in 2020. And third, the speculation has swirled almost since the day he took the oath of office about whether he would run for re-election. The pressure for Biden to do so will ramp up significantly after midterm elections, however, especially if and when Donald Trump jumps into the race, which could come as soon as later this year. Those are your trending topics for today. If you are tuned in on any form of social media, like the show, share the show, invite someone else in on the show that you feel may benefit from this valuable information. Joining me today is my special guest, my healthy solution expert who has over 20 years experience as a family physician, and she is impacting lives every single day. Hello, Doc Michelle.
Hello, Lady ReShell. It's good to be with you. It's been a month or so. I had so much going on that I missed you, but I'm back.
Yes, we missed you as well. And we are ready to break down this subject, the sweet dangers of sugar. I know that there's so many questions that surrounds that one word, and we're going to talk about it today.
Yes, yeah, it's in everything, right?
It's in everything. It's like, and I want to talk about just to be realistic with when we talk about sugar, how we handle sugar, how much we use, So the first thing I want to do is talk about the definition of sugar. Like, what is sugar? When you think about sugar, what is it?
Right. So sugar is in everything, right? It's we hear the words fructose, glucose, sucrose, right? So there are different forms of sugar that is found in the world, right? So we have fructose, which are those that can be found in fruits, but can also be added to different things to make it taste better. And so there's fructose, there's sucrose, which is more sort of artificial sweetener as well. And then there's glucose, which is made by our bodies, right, for energy. And all of the, not all sugars are bad for you, right? So fructose in fruits is okay because in fruits, there are other things like your vitamins, your fiber, your minerals that allow that sugar to get broken down slowly by your system, and you're getting those other nutrients. So when we say, avoid sugars, we don't mean all sugars, right? Lactose is found, anything ending in that OSE, right? Lactose is a other type of sugar that's found in dairy. Again, that's found in our natural products. You don't want to have too much lactose either. We think about low fat sugars, lactose free sugars, because we tend to have lactose intolerance, which can cause lots of bloating and gas and things like that. So there's lactose, there's fructose, there's sucrose, and there's glucose, which is made, by our bodies. And we have to know how to manage it, where it's found, and what sugar can do to our bodies.
Okay. So when you think about sugar, you think about carbohydrates, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so, because some people may not know, I know a carb is like, it could be spaghetti, pasta. Some
Right.
people may not know what that is, and they may be like, "Well, I don't eat that much sugar," but they're loading up on the pasta.
Good point, because carbohydrates, when we eat those things in their simplest form, they're broken down to sugars. And it's good to have carbohydrates because we talked about sugars give us some energy. We talk about like before the race, right? The big marathon is coming up next month. People will carb load because, in essence, that gives their body that extra glucose that they're going to need when they are running that race. But too many carbohydrates, if you're not using them for energy, they turn into fat.
Oh no.
Yes, and that's one of the things we'll talk about is how sugar can lead to obesity.
Okay, so there's different types of sugar you mentioned. You have your simple sugars, the complex sugars, and then you have the natural sugars.
Mhm. Right,
So,
right. And those simple sugars, right? As we said, they're carbs. They're quickly absorbed by the body to produce energy, right? And it can be present in both processed food and natural foods, right? So bananas, they have carbohydrates. Lots of fruits have carbohydrates. But then there's also processed foods like crackers, chips, those type of things, pastas that we create from the grains and such can also have sugars in them too.
so I know sometimes when people say they need a quick pick me up and they go get like maybe a chocolate bar or something like that, would that fall under the simple sugars? Because I guess because it breaks down just a little bit quicker. You could feel that
Yes,
rush.
right, right. And it's sugar can be so addicting, right? Because you feel like, okay, I eat that quick sort of processed sugar thing, and it's broken down quickly. And yeah, I feel good. But as quickly as it gave you that sugar high, it can give you that sugar low, right? So as we talked about in the beginning, I said, some of the natural sugars are broken down slowly in your system. They've got other good nutrients that go along with them, right? Exactly, right? And so that's good because you might eat, those whole grains, those whole wheat pastas, your vegetables, your fruits, and they're sweet, but they have these other things in them that allow them to get digested by your system slower. So you're not going to get that quick high and then crash. right? And then it becomes a cycle because then you're like, oh, I'm sluggish, so I need some sugar, and I'm gonna go get a sugary beverage. And it's going to give you a quick high, but again, that's processed sugar, and you're going to get a crash. A lot of that happens with, with kids, and it's Child Obesity Month. If they're having sugary breakfast, sugary cereal, pancakes with syrup, those are sort of those simple processed sugars that they'll feel good for a little bit, and then they'll get to 10 o'clock in the morning in school, and that sugar starts to decline in their system, and they get irritable, right? They get sluggish, and with kids, they don't know what to do with that, so they get irritable and they're not focused, right? Because they don't have the right energy. And so we have to think about that when we think about kids too, right? Is what are we giving them to prepare them for their day? They just started school this month. Are we giving them the right things in the morning for them to have a good, productive learning day?
So do we want, Doc, do we want the slow or the complex, the one that breaks down slower, or do we want, or a combination of both?
Yeah, well, complex, much better for you, those complex carbohydrates, because they take time. You don't want anything where you're talking about sugars that are not sort of naturally found, or we're adding to something to make it taste better, right? We talk about no added sugars. You hear that term a lot, right? No added sugars, because we know that things are going to have sugar in them. But when you start adding sugar to something to make it taste better, that's when you start talking about those simple sugars that you don't want to have. The sugary cereals, the syrup, the sweetened beverages, the donuts, that's all added sugars to make it taste better.
So would you say like added sugars are bad, or is it just how much you're using?
Added sugars are not good for us. Well, we also know that it's hard to avoid it altogether, right? It's hard to avoid it altogether. So it's in moderation. You don't want, if you're on a 2,000 calorie diet, you don't want more than probably 10, 14% of your 15% of your calories coming from all these added simple sugars. And if you think about it, if we're on a 2,000 calorie diet and we have one soda, that's probably, how many calories is in a soda? I haven't had canned soda in so
Yeah,
long.
I don't drink it.
Right, yeah. But one can of soda probably has all the simple sugars you should have in a day. Right. And I've had patients, right? And I've had patients tell me, I've had a patient who told me she can go through 12 cans of soda a day. And just on the other side of that, it's hard to stop that.
Yes.
Because we're not sugary eaters, but when you try to eliminate all sugar, you feel
Mhm.
it. Right? It takes a minute. It takes some time for your body to adjust to that, because your system is functioning at a certain level, and now you've taken that down. And so sometimes it's not going from 12 sodas, and who's out there is listening, right? It's not going from 12 sodas to no sodas. It might be going from 12 to 6. Cut it in half. Start with that. That's a success as well.
It's almost like a drug. Like if you try to wean yourself off of it, it's like you have these cravings, and it's like, okay, you go through these withdrawal symptoms as well, trying to, and you think to yourself like, what really is this that it has me feeling this way, especially if it's not really labeled unhealthy and they're putting it in everything.
Right, right. Well, yeah, sugar can be addicting, and it can be as addicting as things like, heroin for some people, because you get that if that's what you are accustomed to in taking every day, and you get that high, and like you said, you can't you feel like you can't stop it cold turkey, because it does
Okay.
affect
Yes.
your dopamine and your chemicals in your brain that make you feel good, right? When you drink it, you get that high, that energy. And then when you try to stop, you're like, okay, I know it's bad for me. I'm going to stop it. But then you feel so miserable, you go back to it. And that's just the simple thing, not to even talk about what it's doing to your body, which, we could talk about with heart disease and aging and, inflammation and all of that, but how it makes you feel, and how addicting it can be. So it's important to, when you go through your day and you're making choices, we always talk about healthy choices on your show, that you pick. I always tell patients that pick the things that you see that like occur naturally in the earth, in the world, right? So instead of your orange juice, if they have oranges, get oranges, right? Instead of apple juice, get the apple. um, Things like that. So, get your salad. We always talk about salad and all the vitamins and nutrients that come from that. So I always think about, was this something that somebody had to process and put together, or does this come sort of naturally in the earth? And that's a simple way to think about it too,
Yeah.
as you make choices.
I'm one of those people that I can do things cold turkey. So if I decide that, oh, I'm not going to do this anymore, I could just do it cold turkey versus trying to wean myself. So I did try to do it with the sugar. I did like a 30-day no sugar. And I found myself with those withdrawal symptoms. I found myself looking for ways to substitute that sugar in a healthy way. So I was eating more fruit. I would, pick the fruits that I thought that was sweet. I didn't know about the banana, how I didn't know it was high in sugar. So I was eating the bananas, I was doing the grapes, I was doing the strawberries, the kiwi. Like I was incorporating every type of fruit that I could think of, into my, I don't like to say diet, but into my lifestyle, just to get that sugar craving,
Yeah.
try to get it naturally. So it's definitely not an easy thing to do, but I think if you practice it daily, it'll slowly take away that craving for that natural, not that when say processed sugar,
Yeah.
like in cakes
Yeah.
and cookies.
Right. And you made a good point that bananas, especially in diabetics, we talk to them about which fruits are your better fruits, because there's something called your glycemic index. And if you, any phone, any app, you can find it, right? Any app can tell you which foods, which fruits take up your sugar, elevate your sugar more than other fruits, right? So bananas are a big one, right? Because they do have sugars. You don't think about it. I'm not a
Right.
banana fan, but you don't think about it, but it does. And so for diabetics, that can have more of an effect on their sugar than maybe other berries or apples. So you have to it's not easy, right, to know all of this, right? Some folks are app savvy and would download a glycemic index app and figure out which things are they eating that are taking up their sugars. But if you're not app savvy, talk to your provider and then simplify it, right? Again, like we said, if it's occurring naturally, it's probably better for you
Yeah.
than the added sugars and processed things. I just like to simplify things for people who are just getting started on the journey.
The only reason why I knew about bananas is because my daughter is a type 1 diabetic, and I know to bring her sugar, if it's dropping, she can eat a banana to bring her sugar level up, right? And also, we found out that corn has high sugar and peas
Mhm,
has high sugar. So even though
mhm,
it's a vegetable,
mhm.
it has, sugar in it higher than the regular normal vegetables like string beans or stuff
Right,
like that.
right.
So I know that, if certain things that she eat, okay, we know we have to factor in the carbs on certain things if it has, the sugar in it. So I looked up 1 can of 12-ounce Coca-Cola, 39 grams of sugar
Mm, mm.
in that
That's
12-ounce can.
Yeah,
That's a lot.
that that's a lot of sugar. I think that's like probably almost half of a little Ziploc bag. I mean it's a lot of sugar in those, and we don't, we don't think about it. I don't know who created sodas. Okay, it's a bad thing. Do we really need those? But don't let me get there. But yeah, just I'm not a soda drinker, so when I do drink it, it tastes so sweet to me, and your palate changes, right? So those, if that's what you drink all the time, it doesn't even feel that taste that sweet to
Yep.
you. But when you don't, it tastes like syrup to me. I can't really drink a lot of it.
That's how it was. So when I was doing the sugar for no sugar for 30 days, that's how it was with the fruit. Like the fruit was, it tasted so sweet to me because I wasn't eating the sugar. And I'm like, oh my
Mhm.
God, the fruits is actually really good. It was just
Right.
so sweet to me because I didn't have the other added sugar in any of my stuff. I
Yes.
want to read some of these
Yes.
comments really quick. Thank you guys for tuning in. We have Brenda, we have Nicole, we have Red, and we have Mylea tuning in today. Mylea says she had a question. She was looking forward to the show. She has a question about zero sugar pops. Is it better or is it not really sugar free?
Yeah, you really got to read the label, right? So some of those zero sugar things or sugar free may have artificial sweeteners in them. Your aspartame, I can't even remember all the names of them, but we know that the there's some studies that show too much artificial sweetener is also bad for you and may increase your risk of cancer and cause inflammation. And so read the label. Some of those things, if they say actually like they're sweetened with naturally occurring sugars, maybe a little bit better for you than artificial sweeteners, right? Because sometimes they can use, other naturally occurring sugars, things like Truvia, stevia have those um, better than your other brand name artificial sweeteners. But you always got to, and I talk to patients about this too all the time. Check the food labels. We've got to turn that box over, that bottle over, and see what's in it. What percentage of that beverage or that food is sugar, and what kind of sugar is it? Um, and I also, like I said, I like to simplify things when I talk to patients about reading food labels. I said, if that food label is taking up this whole side of the box, right, or the whole side of that bottle, it's probably a lot of added things, sugars, preservatives, things that you don't want in your body. And so again, to simplify it, yeah, turn the box over, read the label, check the percentages, check what kind of sweetener is in there. You want to limit your artificial sweetener intake. You want to limit your added sugars. We live in a fast-paced society where everything is sort of on the go, and so they add these all these sweeteners, to make it taste good as you run from one thing to the next.
Wow. All right. So Red said, I was really bad at sodas too. He said he didn't like drinking water. So he drank about 6 to 7 pops a day easily, but now about two in some water.
Oh, wonderful. Good. Yes. And like I said, it's hard to give it up completely, but I look at the little victories, right? If you're going from 7 sodas to two, much better. Try to make some days none, right? I tell people, okay, if you've gotten down to two a day, then say, okay, these are the days that I'm going to indulge, right? So you might say Tuesday, Thursday is your soda day. And then the other days you really try to drink water. And you will see that over time that you really don't crave the sugar like you once did. He's probably already feeling that, right? From going from 6 to 7 to two. Kind of like when we talk about quitting smoking, right? Pick the days and the times, if you're doing it slowly, that you're going to give yourself, okay, I know tomorrow I said I'm going to smoke. So today I'm really not
Mhm.
going to smoke. It's the same thing, right? If we're really feeling that, we need to do that to help ourselves.
I was reading, researching for the show, and it said when you have an excess of sugar, it ages you. Like it ages your
Yeah.
skin. I don't think people know that.
Breaks down the collagen. Yeah. And then when you add your sugar and then pollutants, and then if you're a smoker, all these things affect your skin and can cause your skin to look like you're aging excessively more than you are. Again, you want to avoid those sort of simple carbs we talked about, those added sugars, to prevent that.
So, Doc, does honey fall into this? Because they put honey out there like it's more healthier than like the regular sugar. Like,
Yeah. But honey is still sugar. Okay. They make it because it's sort of naturally occurring, right, in the earth, that we can think of it as better than our processed sugars, but it's still sugar. You still want to think about that when you're adding it to your tea and your favorite things. There are some properties of honey, right, that we can be sort of help us through, colds and inflammation, but too much of a good thing can be a bad thing.
wow.
So even though honey is naturally occurring, um, you don't want it's still sugar in essence.
Okay. So there was a study done in 2018 of university students in China that showed that those who drank sweetened drinks 7 times per week or more were more likely to develop moderate or severe acne.
It can affect the hormonal balance, and which can cause more skin inflammation, which can cause more oil production in your skin because it changes the balance, and we see that in our kids, right? And my son, who likes his pancakes in the morning, he noticed that as he aged and got to be a teen, that he was getting more acne. And I would send him the things. I was like, look, okay, it's the sugar in your pancakes, in your syrup. Don't eat that every day, right? In moderation. And he made a conscious effort because when you're a teenage boy, you want to look good. He made a conscious effort to eliminate that from his diet and making healthier, choices. So I think, especially when you talk about kids, we get back to it's Child Obesity Month. When you talk about kids, you've got to make it, when you're trying to help them make some changes, right? You've got to make it something that's important to them too, right? Is it how they look? Is it weight? Because we know that excess sugar can cause weight gain because it also decreases this chemical called leptin, which helps to keep us feeling hungry. And so it's a vicious cycle.
Wow.
See, Nicole has a comment.
Nicole says, I agree. We have to start eliminating unhealthy things. I actually found out that mangoes and banana have a lot of sugar.
We were just
Not,
talking about
I
that.
didn't
We
know
were
it
just
about
talking about
mangoes, but
those.
wow.
Yeah, and that's why that I talked about the glycemic index. That's how we sort of rate which foods have more sugar and can take your sugar level up. It's not something that you can, with all the foods and fruits and vegetables, you can't just know all of it. But I recommend downloading, any of those glycemic index apps that can tell you which fruits and vegetables and foods have the higher sugar content and can take your sugar up quicker.
Brenda says, so no bananas.
In moderation, bananas do have fiber, and they have potassium. So in moderation, right? Yeah, like you said, ReShell, if your daughter's sugar is low, she might need a banana.
Yes.
She might need an orange, something like that to take her sugar up quickly.
Brenda said, I just ordered a soda packet for her cruise and she's going to stick with juice and water and coffee. And she wants to know which juices are bad for you.
Yeah. So I always, in the beginning, we said, if you have the option to pick the actual fruit, avoid the fruit juices altogether, right? So if you're going on your cruise and you see apples or you see oranges or you see the actual fruit, because we said that the the fruit juices can have some added simple sugars to them, whereas the actual the actual fruit has other vitamins, minerals, fiber that allows it to be absorbed by your system slower. That's going to keep you full longer. And the added benefit is you're getting those other nutrients too, with it. So I don't really drink fruit juices. Again, they taste very sweet to me. Your sweet teas, your juices, all of that. You want to avoid that. Brenda, stick with the fruit. Okay.
Stick with the fruit. I guess, it's probably easier to just grab something to drink and go. And when they push
Yeah.
like orange juice, they try to push it like it's healthy. The apple juice like it's healthy, but if you're squeezing it at home by yourself and you're not putting any added things in it, then of course it's healthy. But for them to process it and have it sit on the shelf or in the refrigerator for long periods of time, they have to put stuff in there to preserve it. They have to make sure that it stays sweet by the time you get it. So,
Yeah. Because even if you look, like I said, if you look at the bottles on the shelf of the orange juice, it has oranges, but it also is going to have some sugar. It's also going to have some preservatives to keep it on the shelf. You've
he
been
says,
drinking apple juice.
how much sugar is in that apple juice?
Turn that bottle over and see what it says about the juice and get the apples. Get
So,
the apples, get your, whatever, your plums, whatever juice you're thinking about drinking. If it came from a fruit, then I want you to go get that fruit instead.
right. I would say if you're at breakfast and you don't want to get the orange juice and you're trying to be healthier, like you said, just tell them to give you like a small bowl of fruit and then get the water on the side. So at least you're still getting the juices from the fruit, but then you're getting your water intake so that you can flush stuff out of you naturally.
Yeah, yes. And I'm also a proponent, this is just what I do. If I happen, which I don't do often, have some juice, I make sure that I follow that with a full glass of water,
There you go,
right?
Brenda. What the doc just said. So if you're
She
gonna
says she's
get, if
gonna
you
catch
just gotta get that juice, Brenda, maybe cut it down to, if you're on a cruise for 3 or 4 days, do the juices 2 days and drink the glass of
Yeah,
juice, like Doc said. Follow it with a full glass of water, so at least you're cutting that sugar
you're
down a
getting
little
that in.
bit before it hits your
Hmm.
system.
Yes,
It makes sense.
yes.
Yeah. Look, she
Reach
got
for
the
water
pictures of the
first.
fruit. That's so funny.
She got all the fruit there.
At
I
least
guess
you're
you,
trying, Brenda. You're trying.
right. Yeah. I'm glad you asked the question.
At least you are trying. It's about just incorporating it in your diet slowly, because sometimes if we try to do it really fast and we get overwhelmed and then it doesn't last. So just like Doc said, the little things. If you're drinking Coke 12 um, things a day, cut it down to 6, and then a couple of weeks later you move it down to 3 and move it down to 1. So she said, "Okay, juice and water it is." Yay, Brenda, we are so proud of you. I want to
Good.
recognize my sponsor before we go on, who make it possible for me to go live week after week, who is Paula Kelly with Allstate. And she's located at 327 East Glenwood Lansing Road in Glenwood, Illinois. She specializes in home, auto, and life insurance. If you talk to her, let her know that Warriors Talk sent you. If you are just tuning in, this is Lady Rochelle with Warriors Talk. Joining me is Doc Michelle, our healthy solution expert. And we're talking about the sweet dangers of sugar. We are live on Intellectual Radio. Share the show out. Invite somebody else in so they can get this valuable information. Doc Michelle, one of the things that I wanted to talk about as a cancer survivor, there are information going on saying that the sugar causes cancer. So whenever you tell somebody, "Oh yeah, I had cancer or I'm dealing with cancer," then they say, "Girl, you got to cut out the sugar. You can't eat no sugar. Like that sugar is causing that cancer."
Yeah, I mean, there have been studies, right, that show that excess sugar intake could increase your risk of developing, certain cancers. The sugar increases inflammation in your body, causes what we call insulin resistance, which we sort of always talk about with diabetes, but can also be linked with increased cancer risk. And I think there was a study I was looking, 430,000 people found that added sugar consumption was positively associated with an increased risk of esophageal cancer, lung cancer, GI cancers. Many cancers are linked to that excess sugar intake. When we talk about, the sweet dangers of sugar, and you put it all together, right? Yes, excess sugar, because it causes inflammation in the liver and in the body, can increase your risk of cancer. And it's funny, when I see oncologists, cancer doctors talking to patients, right, about treatment and what they can do, they're going to talk to you about the chemo and the radiation and all that, but they're also going to tell you about a plant-based diet and decreasing your sugar intake and exercising and all of those things, because we know that those things also can decrease your risk
Let me
as
just
well.
say, some of the doctors may say that.
Yeah,
My
not
doc,
all.
not all. My doctor did not say that. But what
Mm.
she did was she sent me to a nutritionist, right? Because of the chemo, I was losing weight and I was trying to find out, okay, how can I keep my weight on? So she sent me to the nutritionist and I'm like, what type of supplements can I take to, gain weight, to make sure I'm getting all of my nutrients and stuff? And the nutritionist told me, as long as you're eating the right foods, you don't necessarily need to take supplements, right? Make sure that you're getting what you need through your foods, and that comes with selecting the healthier choices, to make sure, unless you have some sort of deficiency that you have to substitute with, some sort of vitamin. But yeah, she was like, get it through that. But my doctor did not, she didn't restrict me and say, oh, no sugar, or you have to do this. And I heard, because when you're going through that chemo, they want to make sure that you do have a little weight on you, some sort of fat on you when you're going through treatment, so that your body, your heart, and everything can deal with what you're going through.
Right. Yeah. We don't want to put you on a diet where you're gonna lose weight, because we do want you to have those nutrients. But like, I'm glad, and hopefully most oncologists, if they're not talking to the patient directly, they're just at least sending you to a nutritionist, to a registered dietitian, to talk about what are you eating and what you can do to have a healthier diet.
Yeah, I like that she did that. Like, and I don't know if it's because maybe you guys are under some type of oath that you really can't push. Like, I think that will go along with the holistic maybe side of it. So I don't know if maybe it's just that, or maybe they're not educated in the nutrition side of it. So if you're not, then okay, I'm gonna send you to somebody who is, so that they can, tell you what you need to do. So she did do that, and I was
Yes.
I was happy that she did that, and the nutritionist was able to help me to, especially when you can't eat anything, And she was like, "Well, what is one thing that you like to eat? Eat that. If you got to eat that until you're able to gain your taste in your mouth, then you do that. Like, don't just not eat. Eat something."
Right.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. If anybody out there is going through cancer or knows someone that is, and they haven't sent you to a nutritionist or registered dietitian, ask for that. Ask for that. And you're right, that doctors aren't really. We don't get a lot of education in nutrition education. I think now they're starting to do that, but 20, 30 more years ago, it just wasn't happening. It was not happening. They would teach you how to manage the disease state, but not how to help prevent the
yes,
disease,
yes.
right? And so we're doing that more now as we learn more about how these things affect cancer. So hopefully, especially the new providers coming out, are doing that.
Well, I'm glad, Dr. Michelle, that you have went the extra mile to get that information, so that you can equip your patients and the people that you educate, with living a healthier lifestyle and things that you can do, so that you don't have to keep putting a band-aid on the disease. Well, okay, why you have this disease? Try to eliminate this and this and see what you can do. Take a different approach to it versus, all of the medicine. and stuff. So, okay. So, Nicole said, it's so confusing because my oncologist told me that there is no rock solid evidence that sugar is the cause of cancer.
Yeah, there's ongoing studies that they're doing all the time, but you can imagine it's a difficult thing to study, right? Because the person who is eating and drinking sugar, they're also exposed to other things, right? They're eating other things. It's hard to study very effectively because sugar is in everything. So we look at, okay, what does sugar do in the body, right? So we talked about like insulin resistance and inflammation and things like that. And then we sort of we extrapolate, right? And we say, okay, well, if it's causing these things, chances are, as we do more studies and learn more, it's a complex relationship. But we think that there is a risk. And we know that cancer risk is not just one thing, right? It's your genetics plus what you eat, plus what you're exposed to in the environment. It's multifactorial. But we always talk about, well, how can you reduce the risk with the things you can, with the things you can do, right? Because lots of disease states don't come from one thing, it's multifactorial.
Wow. So, like with diabetes, it could come from being overweight. It could be genetic. Um,
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. The increased sugar intake leads to insulin resistance, which then leads to diabetes, right? Um, so there's many different factors to consider when we talk about disease states like diabetes, cancer, heart disease. There's a link between sugar and heart disease. Heart disease is the number one killer
Yes.
of people in the United States. And again, if you have risk factors, let's say you have a family history of heart disease and maybe you're obese or you have diabetes, which also puts you at risk, you certainly don't want to add to that heart disease by having excess sugar in your diet, right? And that's why a lot of the things that we think about in the medical community, some diseases tend to run together, right? If you have diabetes, you tend to also be at increased risk of heart disease because they all have the same sort of underlying issue of starting with inflammation in the pancreas, in the blood vessels, in the heart. It all it all goes together.
All of that is on my list. You talked about the
Yeah.
kidneys, the pancreas, the liver, the cardiovascular, the skin. And I'm glad because as I was doing my research, Dr. Michelle, most of the researchers were saying that there is a direct link with cancer and sugar. And I know maybe the doctors are not supposed to say that, like they probably not supposed to say it, but all of the researchers that went to, they said yes, it is, and you really can't
Mhm.
deny it because of the glucose. We know that it breaks down just like it's sugar, although when the cancer cells see that, it gravitates toward it more,
Yes,
like
cancer loves
intensify.
sugar.
Yeah. So
Cancer cells love sugar, and it doesn't matter what kind of sugar,
right,
really. Mhm.
it doesn't differentiate between it. It just says, oh, this is sugar and we're going to get it.
Yes,
So
yes, and
yeah.
it will grow and multiply.
Yeah. So I'm glad you
Mhm.
didn't, because I was wondering, but I was like, I wonder what she
Yeah,
gonna say. So
yeah, no, it's
so
true. We always on all your shows, we come
you,
back to what you put in your body.
and
I can,
you're always honest about whatever it is, you state the facts, and the people need to know what those facts are. How are we going to change the way we're living, the way we're eating, and to have a better outcome with our health if we don't get the right information.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
important.
It's important. It's important. And you are right in that providers may not feel equipped to have that discussion, right? So we always talk about being your own advocate too, right? Because we providers or doctors are more comfortable some with just with treating the disease state than talking about what caused the disease state. And sometimes it's a not an easy conversation to have, right? Because if I say to you, the fact that you drank a lot of soda and whatever may have contributed to your cancer, how would that make someone feel, right? They may feel bad about that. And so it's not easy conversations to have with patients, but it's important for not only them, but what are they teaching the rest of the family, their
Right.
kids,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
It breaks my heart when I see obese children, because I know obese children lead to obese adults
Yes.
with all the problems of obese adults. And if
Yeah.
we don't do something about it when they're younger, and we know that children have high fat and high sugar
Mhm.
diets because we're busy, we're
Yep.
busier every day, and those things are quick and easy,
Mhm.
and we give it to our children. And they may be in an area where they can't even exercise safely to burn off the calories. It's a vicious cycle. So, but we got to do what we can.
Totally agree. I got three, two teenagers and a little tweenager at home, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
Mhm.
Lisa, thank you for joining us. The sweet dangers of sugar. I wanted to go into the sexual health part when it comes to sugar and how that can also play a role, especially on men. It says if you are a man, you may want to skip the dessert on a date night. Sugar may impact the chain of events that you need for an erection. If it affects your circulatory system, which controls the blood that flows throughout your body, that you need your thing to work properly.
Right, right. And it gets back to what we talked about, right? You got to figure out when you're talking to people about something like stop your sugar intake, you need to be able to relate that to something that is
Yes.
important to you, right? Because that's going to be your motivating factor, right? And for men, erectile dysfunction is going to be a motivating factor, right? We talked about sugar. It affects inflammation. It affects circulation. We talked about heart disease and what happens in the heart, blood vessels happens in all blood vessels. Okay.
Wow,
And
okay.
so that's an important point to make. And that again is going to be what motivates that person to decrease their intake for sure.
Yeah. Kenya says, I believe that a conversation to be had with their patients based on the fact if they can change some of the things that they might have a higher rate of cancer not reoccurring.
Not recurring.
I
Yeah. We
believe
can't keep
that.
doing the same thing, right?
I totally agree. Like, okay, now that we had this cancer diagnosis, let's take a look at how we're going to move forward to decrease our risk of they don't have that conversation, doc. I'm just going to be honest. My doctor did not have that conversation. It was like, if you have any issues, if I wasn't under her care for the first, 5 years and see your general doctor, it wasn't okay, how we're going to move forward. And I think
Mm.
it's important. And some places have this as after cancer care where you can go to this place to where they address all of that. And I don't know if we have that in
Mhm.
Illinois. I'm sure we may have it in some
Mm.
parts to where you can have that after cancer care.
Yeah, that's so important. I don't know if all cancer facilities have that, but Nicole is exactly right, right? Okay, I've gotten through this sort of acute sickness, illness. I've gotten the treatment that you prescribed for me, but now what, right? And so that's where those lifestyle changes um, are important because that's where you're going to decrease the inflammation in your body, decrease your stress, eat the right foods, all of that, boy, does it make a difference. And again, if folks are not, if your doctors are not talking to you about that, that's unfortunate, but then be an advocate for yourself and ask for that. But some people don't know to ask, and that's unfortunate too, right?
Right. Maybe to open up the conversation to where the doctor may feel comfortable going that extra mile with you to say, "Hey, okay, yeah, let's see what we can do about that," or here's some information or a person you can talk to.
Yeah, and I think nutrition education for everyone is important because it is so complicated what you should be eating and what you shouldn't. And that's why we have to simplify it into, read the food labels, know that, you shouldn't drink the juice or the soda or eat the fruits. You simplify it for your patients first and then have more deeper conversations.
Yes, Red said it's always good to know about sugar because we sometimes don't know and don't always ask the right questions. That's
Yeah,
so true.
right.
It's true.
Mm-hmm.
It's true.
Yeah.
I think we see a lot of things say, oh, this is bad for you. This is bad for you. Don't eat that. Don't do this. And it's like, okay, why? And if I'm craving these things, how do I get to the point to where I can modify, what I do eat so that I can feel some sort of satisfaction?
Yeah. And that's what we talked about earlier, right? To make small changes, recognize that not all there's sugar in everything, but how do you get the better, more natural occurring sugars and eliminate your added sugars, right? Like I said, if it comes from the earth, then that's going to be better naturally occurring sugars in your fruits and vegetables and grains from the ground and things like that versus the things we add in. And you don't know how to ask that question, right? But you can always ask your provider. And if you don't know, you can also call the number on the back of your card to find out whether seeing a nutritionist or a dietitian is covered in your plan. In many plans today, it is covered because we're learning more, right? So you may not even have to ask your provider, depending on your insurance. You can just call benefits, okay, and ask them, is that a covered benefit for me? Can I see a nutritionist or a dietitian? And they can tell you, and they can get you one.
Lisa said this is some good information. I totally agree because I didn't even think about that number on the back of the card too. I mean, you're paying for this insurance and those are all your benefits laid out for you to let you know exactly what you're supposed to get. So I totally agree with it. I have a quick question, Doc Michelle. Do you feel like cancer should be labeled a carcinogen?
The sugar should be labeled a carcinogen.
Yes, I'm
Sugar
sorry.
should,
Yes. What did I just say?
yeah.
Did I say
You
cancer?
said cancer, yeah.
Yes.
I know what you meant. Okay. Oh, yeah. I mean, I think at some point it may come to that. It may come to that. But that's, because the society we live in, it's going to be a tough hill to climb
Right.
to get that listed as a
Yeah.
cancer causing agent, right?
Right. I feel like if they can legalize marijuana, I think we're on the way.
Right. I hope so. Yeah. But yeah, there's a lot of money in sugar for corporations.
Yeah.
So that might be a tougher nut to crack, hill to climb, but yeah.
Yeah. Kenya said that this is so much needed. I'm telling you, it is really mind baffling that it has become a money game and not about saving lives.
We are in a capitalist society. Yes, ma'am. Making money is important, very important, and runs a lot of decisions when it shouldn't, right? It's quite frustrating, quite frustrating. But that's why I've always told you I've got to try to empower you out there to make the right decisions for yourself. It's easy for me to write the prescription they taught me how to write in med school. I can write you all the prescriptions that you want, but that's a temporary fix.
Awesome. Can you give us some quick words of wisdom about the sweet dangers of sugar?
Sweet dangers of sugar. It can affect all parts of your body, okay? From how it makes your brain feel like a high to what it does to your heart, your pancreas, erectile dysfunction. It affects everything. So keep it simple, but not the sugars. Avoid simple sugars. Eat your naturally occurring sugars if you must avoid fruit juices, avoid sugary drinks. That's the one thing. If we do that, we eliminate a lot of sugars in our diet, right? Reach for the fruits, reach for the natural vegetables. So avoid your sugary beverages, and advocate for yourself. And if you've never seen a registered dietitian, talk to one. I would encourage everyone to do that, right? And check what your benefits are, because you probably can do that based on any of your medical conditions. If you're obese, if you're overweight, if you have diabetes, insurance companies want you to talk to their registered dietitian. But sometimes the provider might not be talking to you about that because they're busy writing the prescription. And you remember that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I would encourage you guys to join me next Monday right here on Intellectual Radio at 6 p.m. I'll leave you with these words of wisdom. To truly stop feeding cancer, you would have to stop feeding all of your healthy cells too. As always, thank you for tuning in to Warriors Talk with author and founder Lady ReShell, where we are changing lives one warrior at a time.
Thank you for listening to this week's edition of Warriors Talk with Lady ReShell. To find out more about Warriors Talk, follow at Warriors Talk, the number 1, on all social media outlets, and Warriors Talk with Lady ReShell on YouTube. Please join us next week and every Monday evening at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time on IntellectualRadio.com for Warriors Talk with Lady ReShell, where we encourage, educate, and empower you into action.